She was left tied to a tree by brutal outlaws. The sun was setting. Her strength was fading. Then, a figure appeared from the shadows, silent, watchful, and armed. But what happened next? No one could have predicted. Thank you so much for watching. And for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from, and why you're following this. Sarah Miller had been traveling west with her family when disaster struck. Their wagon train was ambushed by a band of outlaws just outside of Tucson territory. Her parents and younger brother were killed in the attack, while she was taken captive. For 3 days, the outlaws dragged her along as they fled toward the mountains. When they finally made camp in a remote canyon, their leader, a scarred man called Rattlesnake Jack, decided she was more trouble than she was worth. Tie her to that oak, he ordered his men. Someone'll find her eventually, or not. His cruel laugh echoed through the canyon as they secured her wrists behind the thick trunk. The outlaws left her there, bound tightly with rough rope that cut into her skin. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, and Sarah's throat burned with thirst. Hours passed and she drifted in and out of consciousness, her once white dress now torn and stained with dust and blood. "Please," she whispered to the empty canyon, "someone help me." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain, Sarah heard the soft sound of approaching hoofbeats. Her heart raced. Outlaws returning? Soldiers? Either could mean salvation or further torment. What emerged from the shadows was neither. A lone Comanche warrior atop a painted Mustang approached cautiously. His face was stoic, his dark eyes scanning the area for any sign of threat. Sarah had heard terrible stories about the Comanche, tales that made children hide under their blankets at night. She trembled, unable to run or defend herself. The warrior dismounted silently, his movements fluid and deliberate. He approached Sarah, knife in hand. She closed her eyes, certain this would be her end. Instead, she felt the ropes around her wrists loosen as he cut through them. Sarah opened her eyes to find the warrior offering her a water skin. She drank gratefully, the cool liquid reviving her parched throat. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice hoarse. "My name is Sarah Miller." The warrior did not respond. He simply watched her with unreadable eyes. Sarah noticed a long scar across his throat. Perhaps he couldn't speak at all. He gestured toward his horse, then to the west, offering her a choice. Sarah hesitated only briefly. She had nowhere to go, no family left, and this stranger had shown her more kindness than any white man had since the attack. "I'll go with you," she said simply. The warrior nodded once, then helped her onto his horse, before mounting behind her. As they rode away from the canyon, Sarah felt something unexpected: hope. She didn't know who this silent savior was or where he was taking her, but somehow she felt safer than she had in days. The warrior guided his horse expertly through the darkening landscape. Sarah noticed how he constantly scanned their surroundings, alert to any danger. Though he couldn't speak, his actions communicated clearly he was protecting her. "Do you have a name?" she asked after they had ridden for some time. The warrior touched his chest and made a gesture like eagle wings soaring. Sarah understood. "Eagle," she said. When he shook his head slightly, she tried again. "Flying Eagle?" He nodded, seeming pleased that she had understood. It was the beginning of a wordless communication between them that would grow stronger with time. As night fell completely, Flying Eagle guided them to a small hidden cave. He built a small fire, careful to keep the smoke minimal, and offered Sarah some dried meat from his provisions. The food was tough but nourishing, and Sarah ate gratefully. "The men who did this," she said softly, "they killed my family. My father, mother, and little brother Thomas. We were heading to California to start a new life." Tears welled in her eyes. "Now I have nothing. No one." Flying Eagle watched her intently, his expression softening slightly. He reached into a small pouch at his waist, and withdrew a polished stone, offering it to her. Sarah took it, feeling its smooth surface warmed by his hand. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the stone's surface. "Is this a gift?" He nodded, then pointed to the stone and back to himself. "It reminds you of home?" Sarah guessed out another nod, more emphatic this time. Then he pointed to the stone, to Sarah, and made a sweeping gesture across the horizon. "You're saying, I can find a new home?" she asked. Flying Eagle's eyes seemed to approve of her understanding. It was strange how much could be communicated without words. Sarah clutched the stone, finding comfort in both the gift and the sentiment behind it. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling over her. Her body ached from the ordeal, and her mind was overwhelmed with grief and uncertainty. Flying Eagle gestured for her to rest while he kept watch. Sarah curled up near the fire, using his offered blanket for warmth. Despite everything, sleep came quickly, her body desperately needing recovery. Her last thought before drifting off was that fate had brought her an unlikely guardian in this wilderness. A silent protector who, for reasons she didn't yet understand, had chosen to save her life. Dawn broke over the rugged landscape, casting golden light across the rocky terrain. Sarah awoke to find Flying Eagle already alert, preparing for their journey. He offered her more dried meat and berries for breakfast, along with precious water from his skin. As they ate in companionable silence, Sarah studied her rescuer more carefully. Flying Eagle wore simple buckskin leggings and a vest adorned with intricate beadwork. His long black hair was tied back with a leather thong, revealing high cheekbones and eyes that missed nothing. The scar across his throat looked old, a testament to some past violence he had survived. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked as they mounted his horse once more. Flying Eagle pointed westward, then made a gesture of gathering people together. "Your people? Your tribe?" Sarah guessed. He nodded, then held up 5 fingers. 5 days' journey? When he nodded again, Sarah felt both relief and apprehension. 5 days meant safety was not too distant, but it also meant 5 days of potential danger from both the elements and the outlaws who might be searching for her. They rode steadily throughout the morning, the landscape gradually changing from rocky canyons to rolling plains dotted with juniper and pinyon pines. Flying Eagle remained vigilant, occasionally stopping to examine tracks or listen to distant sounds that Sarah's less trained ears could not detect. Around midday, they approached a small stream. As they dismounted to refill their water skins and rest the horse, Flying Eagle suddenly tensed. He motioned for Sarah to be still and silent, then crept to the edge of a nearby ridge. Sarah's heart pounded as she waited, fearing that Rattlesnake Jack and his men had found them. When Flying Eagle returned, his expression was grim. He gestured for Sarah to follow him up the ridge, moving low and quietly. From their vantage point, she could see a small camp in the distance, 3 men with horses, unmistakably some of the outlaws who had attacked her family. "They're looking for me," she whispered, fear constricting her throat. Flying Eagle nodded once, then pointed to their own tracks leading to the stream. He mimicked erasing them, then pointed in a different direction from their intended path. "We need to cover our tracks and change direction," Sarah interpreted, "to throw them off." They returned to the horse, and Flying Eagle led them through the stream for nearly a mile before emerging onto rocky ground that would hold few tracks. It added hours to their journey, but Sarah understood the necessity. As the sun began to set, they found themselves in a dense thicket of trees that offered natural protection. "Do you think we lost them?" Sarah asked as Flying Eagle prepared a small, nearly smokeless fire. He made a gesture that Sarah interpreted as "for now," followed by a sign for continued vigilance. It wasn't the reassurance she hoped for, but Sarah appreciated his honesty. That night, as they shared another meal of dried provisions, Sarah found herself wanting to know more about her silent protector, "How did you get that scar?" she asked, pointing to her own throat to clarify her question. Flying Eagle's expression darkened momentarily. He pantomimed riding, then fighting with a knife, dragging it across his throat. "You were attacked?" Sarah asked, horrified. He nodded, then held up 3 fingers. "3 men attacked you?" Another nod. Then he pointed to himself and made a gesture of triumph. "But you survived." "You defeated them," Sarah said with admiration. Flying Eagle touched his throat again and shook his head slightly. "You survived, but lost your voice," Sarah finished softly. His eyes held hers for a long moment, acknowledging her understanding. There was no self-pity in his gaze, only acceptance of what had happened and perhaps appreciation that she had comprehended his story. "My father always said that scars are just reminders that we're stronger than whatever tried to hurt us," Sarah offered. A ghost of a smile touched Flying Eagle's lips, the first Sarah had seen, and he nodded in agreement as night deepened around them. Sarah found herself sharing more of her own story. She told him about growing up in Boston, about her father's decision to seek better opportunities in California after years of struggling as a shopkeeper. "We sold everything to make the journey," she explained. "Father said California was a land of new beginnings, where a man could make his fortune if he wasn't afraid of hard work." Her voice broke slightly. "He worked so hard his whole life, and for what? To die in the dirt at the hands of thieves." Flying Eagle reached out hesitantly, then placed his hand over hers in a gesture of comfort. His palm was calloused but warm, and Sarah found the touch unexpectedly reassuring. "I don't know what I'll do now," she admitted. "I have no family left, no money, no home." Flying Eagle pointed to himself, then to the west, and made his gathering gesture again. "You're saying I could stay with your people?" Sarah asked, surprised. Nodded, though his expression was complex. Sarah sensed there was more to the offer than simple hospitality. "Would they accept me, a white woman?" Flying Eagle's response was a slight tilt of his head, not quite a yes, not quite a no. He made a gesture that Sarah interpreted as "it will be difficult," followed by a sign of determination. "It won't be easy, but you think it's possible," Sarah translated. He nodded, meeting her eyes steadily. For the first time since the attack, Sarah felt a small spark of possibility. She had no illusions about the challenges of living among the Comanche, but what choice did she have? Return to white settlements where she knew no one and had nothing? The path ahead was uncertain, but at least she wouldn't face it alone. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Flying Eagle acknowledged her gratitude with a slight bow of his head. Then he gestured for her to rest while he took the first watch. As Sarah settled down for the night, she realized that despite everything, the loss, the fear, the uncertainty, she felt strangely at peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she was safe under the watchful eye of her silent guardian. The third day of their journey brought new challenges. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising a storm that could not be avoided. Flying Eagle studied the sky with concern, then increased their pace across the open plains. Sarah clung to him as the horse galloped, wind whipping her hair behind her. "Will we find shelter before the storm hits?" she shouted over the rising wind. Flying Eagle pointed to a distant line of trees along a riverbank. They would need to reach it before the deluge began, or risk being caught in the open during what looked to be a powerful thunderstorm, the first. Fat raindrops began to fall when they were still half a mile from the trees. Within minutes, the sky opened up completely, drenching them both. Lightning flashed across the darkened sky, followed by booming thunder that made Flying Eagle's horse skittish. By the time they reached the river, Sarah was shivering violently. Flying Eagle quickly led them to a small overhang in the riverbank, not quite a cave, but enough to provide some shelter from the downpour. He worked efficiently to create a small, protected fire, then gestured for Sarah to remove her soaked Outer garments. Sarah hesitated, but practical necessity overcame modesty. She removed her sodden dress, keeping on her undergarments, which were damp but not completely waterlogged. Flying Eagle politely averted his eyes, offering her his dry buckskin shirt. He kept his back turned as she changed, then hung her dress near the fire to dry. "Thank you," she said, wrapping the buckskin around herself gratefully. It smelled of smoke and pine, and was surprisingly soft against her skin. Flying Eagle nodded, then set about preparing a more substantial meal than they had eaten on previous days. He produced a rabbit he had snared earlier, but hadn't had time to cook, and began preparing it for their dinner. As they waited for the meat to cook, Sarah watched the rain continue to fall in sheets outside their shelter. "Will this delay us much?" she asked. Flying Eagle held up 2 fingers. "2 days?" Sarah clarified. He nodded, looking apologetic. "It's not your fault," she assured him. "We couldn't control the weather." They ate in companionable silence, the sound of rain creating a peaceful backdrop. Despite the delay, Sarah found herself appreciating this moment of respite. Her body was still recovering from her ordeal, and the forced rest was probably necessary. After they had eaten, Sarah gathered her courage to ask something that had been on her mind. "The Outlaws," she began, "the ones who attacked my family and took me. They're called Rattlesnake Jack's gang. Have you heard of them?" Flying Eagle's expression darkened as he nodded. He made a gesture of cutting across his palm, then pointed in various directions. "They've hurt many people? Across a wide area?" Sarah interpreted. He confirmed with a nod, then made a gesture that clearly conveyed disgust. "Even your people fear them?" Flying Eagle shook his head firmly, then patted the knife at his belt and made a gesture of strength and readiness. "Not fear, but awareness and preparation. Your people will fight them if necessary," Sarah said. He nodded again, his eyes holding a fierce determination that Sarah found reassuring. Then his expression softened slightly as he looked at her, and he mimicked wiping tears from his face, followed by a questioning look. "Am I still grieving for my family?" Sarah clarified. When he nodded, she sighed deeply. "Yes, I don't think that pain will ever truly leave me. But ... She paused, searching for the right words. "But I'm also angry. They took everything from me, my family, my future, everything we'd worked for." Flying Eagle watched her intently as she continued. "Sometimes I think about what I would do if I ever faced Rattlesnake Jack again," she admitted. "I don't even know if I would want justice or revenge. Is there even a difference?" Flying Eagle considered this, then made a gesture of balance with his hands, followed by pointing to his heart. "The difference is in the heart," Sarah translated. "In the intention." He nodded, seeming pleased with her understanding. "What would you do?" she asked. "If someone had taken everything from you?" Flying Eagle's expression became distant, and Sarah realized perhaps someone had. He touched his scarred throat, then made a gesture of letting something go, like releasing a bird into flight. "You would seek peace, forgiveness?" Sarah asked, surprised. He shook his head, then repeated the gesture, adding a motion of continuing forward. "You would ... move on. Continue living," Sarah interpreted. "Not let it consume you." Flying Eagle nodded, his eyes conveying what his voice could not, that vengeance was a path that offered no true satisfaction, only more emptiness. Sarah contemplated his wisdom as the rain continued to fall outside their shelter. "My father would have agreed with you," she said finally. "He always said that bitterness is a poison you swallow yourself, hoping it will hurt someone else." A slight smile touched Flying Eagle's lips as he nodded in agreement. As evening deepened into night, their small fire cast dancing shadows on the earthen walls of their shelter. The storm showed no signs of abating, lightning occasionally illuminating the landscape in brief, brilliant flashes. "Tell me about your people," Sarah requested. "Where we're going." Flying Eagle began a series of gestures, supplemented by drawings he made in the dirt floor of their shelter. He showed her the layout of his village, the river that ran nearby, the hunting grounds that sustained them. Through his patient explanations and Sarah's growing ability to interpret his signs, she began to form a picture of the community that might become her new home. "And your family?" she asked. "Do you have one waiting for you?" Flying Eagle's expression softened. He indicated a mother, but made a gesture of passing to the spirit world for his father. Then he showed 2 brothers, both older than himself. "No wife? No children?" Sarah asked, then immediately regretted her directness. "I'm sorry, that's too personal." But Flying Eagle didn't seem offended. He simply shook his head, then pointed to his throat. "Because of your injury?" Sarah asked gently. He nodded, his expression matter-of-fact rather than self-pitying. "I understand," Sarah said, though she wasn't sure she did, not completely. In the world she came from, a man's inability to speak might indeed limit his prospects, but surely it wouldn't prevent him from having a family altogether. As if reading her thoughts, Flying Eagle made another gesture pointing to his head, then making a circular motion around the village he had drawn. "It's about ... position, standing in the tribe?" Sarah guessed. He nodded, then mimicked holding a baby, followed by a questioning look. "Who would want to have children with a man who could ... single quotes d ... Sarah stopped, realizing what he was trying to explain. Who couldn't teach them to speak properly? Who couldn't tell stories or sing to them? Flying Eagle's expression confirmed her understanding. Then he made a gesture of strength, followed by one of acceptance. "You're strong enough to accept this," Sarah translated. He nodded once more, his eyes conveying a quiet dignity that moved her deeply. Outside, the storm raged on, but within their small shelter, a deeper understanding was growing between them, a connection that transcended the need for spoken words. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind a transformed landscape. The plains glistened with rainwater, and the river had swollen, rushing past their shelter with newfound vigor. Flying Eagle emerged first, scanning their surroundings with practiced vigilance before gesturing for Sarah to join him. The delay caused by the storm had another consequence. Their food supplies were dwindling. Flying Eagle indicated he would need to hunt before they continued their journey. He pointed to his bow, then to the distant tree line, making it clear he wouldn't go far. "I'll wait here," Sarah assured him. "Be careful." He nodded, then hesitated. Before reaching into his pouch and withdrawing his knife, he offered it to her, handle first. "For protection?" Sarah asked, accepting the knife with some trepidation. She had never wielded a weapon before. Flying Eagle nodded, then demonstrated a simple defensive stance. Sarah mimicked his movements, until he seemed satisfied that she understood the basics. It wasn't much, but it might give her a chance if danger found her while he was hunting. "Thank you," she said, tucking the knife into her belt. "I'll be fine. Go find us something to eat." With a final nod, Flying Eagle disappeared into the tall grass, moving with the silent grace that still amazed Sarah. She settled back against a tree near their shelter, keeping the knife close at hand and her eyes alert to her surroundings. The morning passed peacefully. Sarah used the time to wash her dress in the river and lay it in the sun to dry. The garment was a sorry sight, torn, in places stained with dirt and blood, but it was all she had. When Flying Eagle returned, she would be properly dressed again, though she had grown surprisingly comfortable in the buckskin shirt he had lent her. Just as her dress had nearly dried, Sarah heard an approaching sound that made her blood run. Cold, not the soft footfalls of Flying Eagle returning, but the unmistakable clatter of multiple horses approaching at speed. She grabbed the knife and retreated to the shelter, pressing herself against the earthen wall and trying to control her panicked breathing. "I told you I saw smoke from over this way," a gruff voice called out. "Someone's been camping here." "Could be engines," another voice replied cautiously. Nah, look at this. There was a pause. This here's a white woman's dress. Bet it belongs to that Miller girl we lost. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Rattlesnake Jack's men had found her trail. She gripped the knife tighter, knowing she had little chance against armed outlaws, but determined not to be taken again. She can't be far, the first voice said. Spread out and look for her. Jack wants her found before she can tell anyone what happened. Sarah heard the men dismounting, their boots hitting the ground with heavy thuds. She tried to recall Flying Eagle's defensive stance, how he had shown her to hold the knife. Her hands trembled as footsteps approached the shelter. A shadow fell across the entrance, and Sarah prepared to fight for her life. Just as a bearded face appeared in the opening, a whistling sound cut through the air, followed by a strangled cry. The outlaw at the entrance fell forward, an arrow protruding from his back. Shouts of alarm erupted from the other men, followed by the sound of gunfire. Sarah remained frozen in place, listening to the chaos outside. More arrows whistled through the air, followed by screams and curses. Then came the sound of horses galloping away, the surviving outlaws fleeing. Silence fell, broken only by the rushing of the river. Sarah waited, knife still clutched in her white-knuckled grip, unsure if it was safe to emerge. Sarah, a raspy, barely audible voice called. Sarah gasped. It was the first time she had heard Flying Eagle speak or try to. His voice was damaged, painful sounding, but unmistakably calling her name. She crawled from the shelter to find Flying Eagle standing amid the aftermath of the brief, violent encounter. 2 outlaws lay dead, while hoofprints indicated the others had fled. Flying Eagle himself was wounded, blood seeping from his shoulder where a bullet had grazed him. You're hurt, Sarah exclaimed, rushing to his side. He shook his head dismissively, pointing instead to her with concern in his eyes. I'm unharmed, she assured him. Thanks to you. She looked at the dead outlaws, then back to Flying Eagle. You spoke. He touched his throat, wincing slightly. Gensai, he managed to rasp, the word clearly causing him pain. You can speak in emergencies? Sarah asked, understanding dawning. It hurts you, but you can. He nodded then, gestured urgently toward their horse. The surviving outlaws would surely return with reinforcements. They needed to leave immediately. Sarah quickly gathered their few belongings while Flying Eagle checked his wound. The bullet had only grazed him, leaving a bloody furrow across his upper arm. Sarah tore a strip from her newly cleaned dress to bind the injury. This is the second time you've saved my life, she said as she tied off the bandage. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Flying Eagle shook his head, indicating no repayment was necessary. Then he pointed to the dead outlaws and held up 3 fingers, followed by a questioning look. There were 3 men total, Sarah confirmed. The third escaped. Flying Eagle's expression turned grim. He helped Sarah onto the horse, then mounted behind her. They set off at a gallop, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the river before the outlaws could return. They rode hard for hours, stopping only when necessary to rest the horse. By sunset, they had covered more ground than in any previous day of their journey. When they finally made camp in a well-hidden gully, Sarah could see that Flying Eagle was exhausted, his wounded arm clearly causing him pain despite his stoic demeanor. Let me check your wound, she insisted, gently removing the makeshift bandage. The bleeding had stopped, but the area was angry and red. Sarah cleaned it as best she could with water from their skins, then rebound it with a fresh strip of cloth. Thank you, she said softly as she finished. Not just for today, but for everything since you found me. Flying Eagle met her gaze, then slowly, deliberately raised his hand to his throat. With obvious effort, he whispered, "Worth ... the pain." Sarah's eyes filled with tears at his sacrifice, knowing how much it hurt him to speak, yet choosing to do so for her. Rest now, she urged. I'll keep watch for a while." He nodded gratefully, settling back against his saddle. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed him. His breathing deepening into sleep. Sarah watched over him as darkness fell, reflecting on the strange path her life had taken. 2 weeks ago, she had been traveling west with her family, full of hopes and dreams for their new life in California. Now her family was gone, and her future lay with a Comanche warrior who had risked everything to save a stranger. The next morning brought clear skies and renewed determination. Flying Eagle seemed stronger, his wound already beginning to heal. As they prepared to set out for the final leg of their journey, he sketched a map in the dirt, showing Sarah that they were now very close to his village. "Will we reach it today?" she asked hopefully. He nodded, pointing to the position of the sun and then to a spot lower in the sky. They would arrive by mid-afternoon, as Flying Eagle had predicted. They crested a ridge shortly after midday to see a Comanche village spread out in the valley below. Smoke rose from multiple tipis, and Sarah could make out people moving about their daily tasks. Children played near the central area, while women worked on hides and men tended to horses in nearby corrals. Sarah felt a surge of anxiety. What if they don't accept me? Flying Eagle placed a reassuring hand on her arm, then pointed to himself and made a gesture of determination and protection. He would stand by her, whatever came. They rode down toward the village, immediately drawing attention. People stopped their activities to watch the approaching pair, a Comanche warrior and a white woman in a torn dress, riding double on a tired horse. An older man stepped forward as they reached the edge of the village, speaking rapidly in Comanche. Flying Eagle dismounted and helped Sarah down, then faced the elder. Through a series of gestures and occasional painful whispers, he explained Sarah's situation. Sarah stood straight, meeting the curious and sometimes hostile gazes of the villagers with as much dignity as she could muster. She was afraid, but refused to show it. This might be her only chance at survival, at building a new life from the ashes of her old one. The elder studied her for a long moment, then spoke again to Flying Eagle. More villagers gathered around, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. A tense silence fell over the group. Finally, an older woman stepped forward. She looked Sarah up and down, then said something to the elder in Comanche. Whatever she said seemed to shift the mood slightly. She approached Sarah and took her hands, examining the rope burns on her wrists and the bruises on her arms, evidence of her ordeal. The woman turned to the gathered tribe and spoke at length, gesturing toward Sarah and then to Flying Eagle. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but the woman's tone was firm, brooking no argument. When she finished, the elder nodded slowly. He approached Sarah and, to her surprise, offered her a small wooden cup containing water. Sarah recognized the significance of the gesture even before Flying Eagle's approving nod confirmed it. She was being offered hospitality, acceptance. However, tentative. Sarah accepted the cup with both hands, drinking the water gratefully. A collective exhale seemed to pass through the gathered tribe. The crisis point had passed, though Sarah knew the road ahead would not be easy. The older woman, who Sarah would later learn was Flying Eagle's mother, took her by the arm and led her toward one of the tipis. Flying Eagle followed a few paces behind, exchanging words with some of the men who had questions about his wound and their journey. As they walked through the village, Sarah caught his eye. Without words, she conveyed her gratitude and her determination to make this new life work. He responded with a slight nod that contained its own promise. She would not face these challenges alone. The sun was setting over the plains as Sarah entered the tipi that would be her temporary home. Outside, the life of the village continued. Children laughing, meals being prepared, stories being shared. It was an unfamiliar world, one she would need to learn to navigate day by day. But as Flying Eagle's mother showed her where she would sleep and offered her clean clothes, Sarah felt something. she had not expected to feel again after the attack on her family hope. This was not the future she had imagined when they set out for California, but perhaps it was the future she was meant to find. A new beginning, in the most unexpected of places, with the most unexpected of guardians, a Comanche warrior who had saved her life without speaking a word, but whose actions had spoken volumes.